Welcome to the Gauntlet Podcast. My name is Lowell, and I'm joined by my co-host, Sherry Stewart.
Hello.
And I'm super excited this week. We are joined by Jamila Najati, who is of Sword Queen Games, works with her partner, Maria Mison, and a ton of games. The last few months, like a bunch of my spare money has been buying all these delicious itch.io games. They're really fun and exciting. Thank you for being willing to be with us this week.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
So, listeners, what we do is we have 3 segments. And in our first segment, we will have each of us talk about a game that we played on the Gauntlet or during GauntletCon in the previous month. Just describe what it is, talk a little bit about it. We'll each do that and ask some questions of one another. And we have our set order. And I know Sherry doesn't care for it, but we always start with Sherry. Sherry, how was your October?
Well, it started out a little slim because all of my beloved friends from high school and college decided they want to spend time with us. So I lost some weekends having an excellent time with people I love. So a few less games, but it ended up being amazing by the end because of GauntletCon. So off Gauntlet, I played Scum and Villainy, played 13th Age, played a hack of Mutant Year Zero to be Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri kind of hack. We played action cards for our homebrew. Played Dream Apart, a session of that was lovely. And of course played the last little bit of Die. Yes.
Which was heavy.
It was a heavy ending. It was a very emotional October, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And then started a quarterly series of a Coriolis hack of Impulse Drive, and that was a lot of fun. Finished up Noir, which was a dynamite game with another emotional ending that was lovely. And then for GauntletCon, I got to play Become One with the fabulous GM Jamila Najati. So that was awesome. And that's what I'm going to talk about is Become One. So the game was an emotional Mecha Jam entry by Jamila. And essentially it's a very streamlined PBTA game described as a game of memory and emotion. It's very much shaped by the players and the roles that they choose. The roles, there's 4 of them. You play anger, fear, regret, or love. You are essentially the AIs that run the mecha when the pilot can no longer. And you've been fragmented, and all you have are some memories that you've sort of absorbed from the pilot that you hold on to. And one of the players has some angry memories, another fear, regret, and love. And the entire game is an interplay of those 4 emotions trying to keep that pilot alive and get that pilot back and maybe even succeed in the mission. It's a tight game. There's 2 moves. There's 4 roles. You define the world with a set of devastating questions.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Just like, oh no, okay, here we go. And it ends up being an incredibly complete character who's in a world that you've managed to define by these memories amazingly. And then you're in this horrible situation and you are literally being steered by the emotions. It's pretty amazing. I'll tell you what worked for me. 1, it was a one-shot and every minute of that game delivered. I think, it was so easy to understand and figure out what you needed to be doing. It was really like that first part of it when you got those questions, you're like going, let's see if I'm answering this is love. What is the, sort of very love-infused answer I need to give? And I want to do this, but I want something that has a little sense of, so you can see everyone like thinking really hard on their stuff, and then they'd say something and you'd go, I didn't expect that. And the character you got was like incredibly complex by the end with 8 questions. 8 questions, people. And it was insane. So you're building the character and the world at the same time, and they're all snapshots of these precious memories. That's the thing you're holding on to as the AI to kind of help steer yourself through what's going on. It was totally engrossing. It was like you could just get your handle on it right away and get going. And I really loved it. And I think every other player was leaning into it. And we were all so intent and always so surprised every time someone else took control for a few moments. Yeah, wow. Everything was shaped and reshaped by that.
I want to say one of the things that struck me is, and I went back and looked at the questions again, is how smartly designed those questions are for creating the world. Like, we ended up with a very rich, kind of detailed, I got a very strong sense of what the mechas and the world and the approach was. And I went back and looked at the questions, and it was all emergent from that. It wasn't like those questions said, these are some of the boundaries and things like that. We really did build all of that material that got used in a super smart way. And I was really well done. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. Because, like, I was just like, when I was designing the game, the initial design was just which is most of the game, actually. It somehow made it to most of the final form. I just did it over 4 days.
Wow.
But, when I say 4 days, I mean, I spent 6 hours in front of the computer, like, obsessing. But, yeah, it was 4 days. And I was just really leaning into all the Gundam series that I loved, all the mecha anime that I loved. And I think the fun thing about designing is you surprise yourself with how much you absorb from the world around you. And I think everybody has that potential, definitely, like as a creator, as a writer, as a designer.
It blew me away. And it was, the thing is it's funny because it was a great table.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And you were a great GM.
Thank you.
And usually with a game like that, when I'm sitting at that good of a table with that good of a GM, I'm like, well, I don't know if it'll work with every table, but I kind of think it would,
Yeah.
It's just like, it was just, you only had what you needed, and everything you had was exactly what you needed. So it was a perfect package. I also, if there's anything I'm less sure about the game, is I would need a few weeks before I could play it again.
Yeah.
Because I kind of walked out and I was like, whoa. I think because it was emotions all full caps the whole way through.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I loved particularly after the game was all the players going, oh my God, like if you hadn't had the love person, the game would have been so different. Oh, what if it was just these two? And it was like everyone was looking at it with their eyes sparkling, and their brain fritzing out. And it was just really fun.
Yeah.
An experience on a lot of levels. It was like not only were you playing this thing and enjoying it, but you were enjoying the game itself as a really good design afterwards. Because while you were doing it, you were way too engrossed.
I was really so happy because it was my first time playing and running at Gauntlet Con. And the whole weekend, like, I was just so amazed with how the players are really just so present and so intense and so fully there. And I remember Will was part of the game, and he was actually in my Bluebeard's Bride game. And yeah, and he was like, I was expecting Bluebeard's Bride to be the most intense game, but I feel like Become One became the most intense game. And like, he messaged me about it afterwards, and he said he thinks the difference is that in Bluebeard's Bride, the house is like attacking you, everything is attacking you, right? Versus in Become One, the players are asked to describe what that is. Like, it's coming from an internal place, but it's still coming from a place where you realize how flawed the pilot is, but how much compassion you have for them at the same time. Yeah, so I was like, and that's why I love playing with people, because it helps me see the game better through different perspectives.
It was a great experience, and I'm so glad we signed up for it. And
yes. I'm super glad you guys are there.
Yeah, I was just saying, I really loved it. It was a great game. I also want to call out beautiful online character keeper design that you had. It was gorgeous and evocative, and having looked through a lot of your other games, your design sense comes through all the way. You said that you design from that kind of visual first in some ways.
Yeah, like I tried designing without doing the visual first, so it's a really weird system. I've made about, I think I counted it recently, I think it's like around 28 games or something, 27, since February. I have to say they're like small scale games. I don't want it to sound like I'm making D&D 28 times or something. And the way it works is I only just got Affinity Publisher recently through Pam Kunzalan. She set up this really generous thing where she was giving out Affinity publisher codes. But so before that, this whole time, I've only been using LibreOffice Writer. So yeah, I'm just trying to like condense it. Actually, what really happens is at 1 a.m. I have an idea, and then I have to write it down on my phone, and then I have to go to sleep. And then in the morning, I start downloading all. It's like a Pinterest board that I have to put together, right? So like I go to unsplash.com or all these other places where you can get beautiful photos, and I just have to put it together. I have to find the font. If I don't do these steps, I can't design the game. Like the game will not come together, and then I have to lay out and write it at the same time at LibreOffice. If not, the game won't. Like I feel like the visual aspect has to communicate at the same time as the design. Because when I read games, like as beautiful as they are, like I really enjoy a lot of games. But if it's just plain text, like there's nothing that's sparking me as a GM or as a player, so I need to have that. So when I design, that has to be there for sure.
That's great. I've heard from some people who have that sort of visual sense, and they always worry about that. So it's really cool to hear that you've embraced that and come from in that direction.
And it's working. So.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you. I had so much fun with the Character Keeper because I just got introduced to the concept through GauntletCon, and I was like, wow, this is like amazing. This has opened my eyes to what online gaming can be for sure.
Let me swap to you and have you tell us about your games in October, and have you talk about which game you want to talk about.
So October, it's like Sherry. It started out pretty light, and then GauntletCon. So off the Gauntlet, I got to play. So I have this ongoing campaign of Lancer.
Oh, what is Lancer?
Oh, so Lancer is so good. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's a mecha game, but the system really feels like streamlined D&D 4th edition combat. Plus
really?
Light PBTA, social, interactive elements. It's so good because the world is so rich. The lore of the mecha and the AI and the galaxy is so good. And at the same time, when you build your mech, it's so satisfying. Like it's modular. You can get into nitty gritty, but it doesn't feel too nitty gritty. You don't feel pressured. It's super fun. Like every time you level up, it's just like such a fun time.
Oh wow!
And then the combat. So D&D 4th Ed combat is kind of like battle chess, right? So
Yep.
So Lancer with the mech and the battle chess aspects. I have to admit, it was hard going back to a D20. I really don't like the D20 probability. Because the first session, I didn't roll anything higher than a 5. It was really, it was so painful. So that's why I made a mech where I don't roll, and the GM has to roll.
The perfect solution.
Right? Because I was like, I'm tired of rolling. I'm not going to do it anymore. The GM's going to do it. But it's worked better. I have a mech that's completely made out of drones now, so it's really good.
That's great.
Yeah. It's such a good system. I love it. You can get the whole thing on itch.io. They're giving away the base version without most of the art. It still has art in it, but without most of the art for free on itch.io.
Wow.
So I highly recommend checking it out so you can... It's really quite a beefy book.
Awesome. I'll check that out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you in the middle of you're just starting your list, and I had to ask more.
It's okay. No. I love Lancer. I'm happy to talk about it. So, off the Gauntlet, I also played Hogwarts. We just got to do character creation. I'm running Hogwarts. I know you guys talked about it, right, like a few episodes ago. I'm doing it because I'm working on my own version of a Harry Potter-esque game, so I wanted to play all the other, but there aren't a lot of Harry Potter games. Like it's weird, right? Like
surprising.
It's like they knew there was competition.
But yeah, and then on the Gauntlet, so I got to play during GauntletCon. I'm so happy. I got to play Fight with Spirit.
Yes.
Good. It's so good. I had so much fun with that. Like it was so good. And then, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. I got to play Liberté. It's like,
I think that's how you say it.
Yeah, which is also... I keep hearing so many good things about the system, so I'm really glad I got a chance to play that. I also got to play Beam Saber, and I got to run Bluebeard's Bride, Balikbayan, and Become One. So that was it was such a great experience at GauntletCon. So the game I'm going to talk about is Balikbayan Returning Home. It's a game that I also created. Actually, the funny thing about Balikbayan, it's the only game I didn't create for a game jam.
Oh.
Yeah, all the others were me marathoning and enjoying all of these game jams. But Balikbayan was the first one where I just really wrote it for myself. I wrote it just because I wanted to. I guess it shows because it's cyberpunk, it's Filipino, it's supernatural, it's all magic. Like, it's everything that I like, but I smashed it together.
Mm-hmm.
It's in beta right now, but it's really playable because it's based on the belonging outside belonging system, which is, I want to say it's an easy system to design for, but I know there are people who struggle with designing for it sometimes. But I think it's because, like, for those who are familiar with the system, the way it works is there are no dice. It's a token economy system. And when we say token economy, each playbook just has a set of strong moves, neutral moves, and weak moves. So in that way, it's up to each player when they're going to fail and when they're going to succeed. And the only way you can succeed is by spending a token, but you can only earn a token when you have a weak move, right? So the game sort of like encourages you to place yourself in this vulnerable way every so often. And it's a lot of fun designing. So Avery Alder created the system for Dream Askew. That's where I first discovered belonging outside belonging. And I think when I was making Balikbayan, and what was really fun to play at GauntletCon was I really wanted to lean into what I feel is important about cyberpunk, which is the revolutionary aspect. I've been kind of disheartened with how some of the more recent cyberpunk stuff is just about looking cool and having tech and a lot of violence. Like, and that doesn't feel like the core of cyberpunk to me. Like, because I'm really coming from a 90s anime Asian perspective, which is really more about understanding how this system is strangling the world, right? And kind of destroying the world. And corporations and big entities are getting away with it. And cyberpunk is really about the different ways people push back against that, right? And how they reclaim the future, basically. And I wanted that in the system in Balikbayan. So in Balikbayan, everybody plays these elementals. They're based on Filipino folklore. So you have things like the Tikbalang and the San Telmo and the Aswang. They're all like deeply ingrained in Filipino culture. I just sort of like took them apart and had fun with it. Like, for example, the San Telmo is originally a spirit that sort of guides people to their death. A lot of our folklore is not nice, you know? Like, I'm going to say that right now. A lot of Filipino folklore is like, children, how dare you go outside, you know? Like, as usual, like most of the world. So the San Telmo is a spirit that leads you to your death. And so instead I was like, I need a hacker, because every cyberpunk game needs a hacker. How about the San Telmo that hacks ghosts instead and gets information that way? So why not combine the idea of a hacker with someone who stands between the living and the dead? So a lot of the playbooks are based on me just experimenting and have fun. So, which is why, like, I had a lot of confidence when I made the game, but I was also like, are people going to be able to pick this up? So I was so happy when I ran it twice at GauntletCon. And, you know, I was kind of nervous because this was the first time I was running the game for people who aren't Filipino. So there was that question of, is this going to work? But everyone just, like, picked it up. Like, I was really happy with how, I mean, because in a way, like, when we play D&D and stuff, we're like, I'm going to be an elf. It doesn't matter if you know the history of elves, or, you know, I'm going to be a dwarf. I don't need to understand runes or whatever. Like, we're just more open to it. And I feel like that was what was happening when I was running it at GauntletCon. I was so happy that people were just picking it up and having a lot of fun with it. And if I'm going to be honest, like, Balikbayan is like my way of decolonizing a lot of things. Like, it's a way of reclaiming something, but I also want it to be fun, right? Like, I want it to be a ridiculous amount of fun. So what worked for me was everyone had fun with the machine magic aspect, because you're playing folklore, supernatural, magical creatures. And I was worried that people would be like, no, but how does the machinery work? Like, how does this? But surprisingly, everybody was like, I just want it to be as magical or as machine as I want it to be, and it's going to flow naturally. So that was so much fun. And I also added a few tweaks to the original design because as much as I love games like Dream Askew and stuff, I feel a lot of it is trying to figure out what you want to do, right? Like the first few sessions is, what does my character want? What does the community want? And as a GM, I like it when you instantly know, like from the start, where you're supposed to go. And you can make it up as you want, but I like having that direction. So I inserted a few things, and the mechanic that I felt really worked well was what you hope for. So there's a part in the playbook where the player has to decide what their character hopes for, what they're trying to do. Does that align with the revolution and defeating the Corp, or is it their own personal hope? And is there a way of connecting it? And so, and it worked out really well because we had so much fun, even in just the one shot, and people going after that hope and opening themselves up to it. Like, so our Santelmo in the first game, he wanted to create a permanent bridge between this world and the underworld, like the world beyond. And we got to end on that scene. It was super cool and stuff like that. It was so much fun. So what I'm less sure about, though, about Balikbayan is, because it takes a different mindset, right? Because even though you can or cannot have a GM in Balikbayan, even if a GM is there, a lot of creative power is up to the player. And I feel like it just takes some getting used to for players to realize how much power they really have, like how they can just choose any move at any point and say, I want this to be a reality right now. Like, for example, going back to our ghost hacking playbook, if they're in a scene, and even if the GM or no one else has established there's a ghost in the area, the Santelmo has the power to say, I see that cop looking at the crime scene, and I see behind him that his dead wife is next to him, and she's whispering things to him, but he doesn't notice. I want to hack into her and get information on what's going on. So the system really encourages people to just make stuff up, right, to whatever they like. And so what I'm worried about is, and I feel like it's just maybe getting people used to the idea, because like after the game, people are like, wow, this is really, it's fun, but it's outside of my comfort zone. Like I have to wrap my head around this. I'm also worried if people are going to be afraid to run this, because a lot of the games I like, people are afraid to run. like Bluebeard's Bride, like Noel. I love those games, but when I see, or Spire, but when I see people talk about it online, they say things like, oh, I'm not a woman, so I can't run Bluebeard's Bride, or I'm not a person of color, so I can't run Noel or Spire. And I feel sad when I see people say those things. I understand where they're coming from, but I believe that if a game is designed well enough, that it shouldn't matter who's running it. And I would, for example, with Bluebeard's Bride, I would rather have more men run it. You know what I mean? Because I want men to sort of understand.
Yes.
I feel like the game educates men.
Yes.
Like, this is a reality,
I
right?
would hope so, yeah.
Right? Yeah, like...
Yep, because
right.
it is... Oh, man, yeah. I don't know how you can play it or run it without going,
this is what happens. Yeah, because like every time I run Bluebeard's Bride, I can see it on the men's faces. They're like, oh, like, but it's because it's built in so beautifully, right? The game is so well designed, and it's not hitting you over the head with it.
No.
And that's what I'm hoping I can do for Balikbayan, and I'm hoping that more people will want to run it, even if they're not Filipino. I'm hoping the cyberpunk will get people to just run it regardless. Like, that's my goal, hopefully.
And the cover art, you've certainly got the visual pull of it. I mean, once I saw that cover, I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. That's all on Splash.com again. Thank you. I just smashed the pictures together.
It looks really good.
Thank you. And I think the other thing I'm not sure about is the lack of mechanical progression. Because in Belonging Outside Belonging, there's no leveling up. There's no HP. I did insert some aspects. Like, I did insert 2 clocks that the players have to be cognizant of, which is 1 clock is for when you start out on the run, and as you tick through that clock, it's possible for the corp to catch up with you. So it gets ticked every time the corp gets like an upper hand or something. And then the second clock is all the characters start out fading, like their magic is fading, they're starting to become mortal again, they're losing their immortality to the humans, but they're trying to bring about the rebirth of magic. So the idea of the game is, can you bring about the rebirth of magic before the corp catches up with you?
Oh, wow.
I tried to insert some mechanical progression through that. I don't know if it's going to be enough for players to be satisfied, because I know that a lot of players enjoy that mechanical sort of sense of progression, that sense of like, I've grown as a character. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that's where I'm coming from. That's what I'm less sure about. But my main takeaway, what I'm really happy, like I really wanted to cry during GauntletCon because I was so happy with how the games were received. In the last game, I even had 2 Filipinos on the other side of the world play the game, and it was so much fun playing with them, but also playing people who were not Filipino. I just had this moment, this really surreal moment of, wow, there are people playing my game, and it's about Filipino-ness, it's about being Filipino, and I don't have to defend it. Like, I don't have to convince mm-hmm. people to play the game. They're just having fun. Because, like, as a Filipino designer, you know, part of the colonial mentality is a lot of us designers, we can't help but design from a white space, design from, like, that perspective, because it's what we know, right? That's how the colonial mentality works. So a lot of the games that you come across from local designers just feel very white, but it's a weird white. Like, it's a Filipino's idea of white. And then when I do see Filipino games, a lot of it focuses on the pre-colonial aspect, which was a long time ago. Like, just for reference, we were colonized for just by the Spanish, we were colonized for mm-hmm. 300 plus years, and then add another almost 100 years from between the Japanese and Americans. So it's like almost 400 years of being colonized, right? So that's like almost half a millennium. And so it really does something where it really does warp one's perspective. And so I know that as an answer to that, a lot of designers keep going back to the pre-colonial state. They keep trying to go back to it, to reclaim it, which I think is important work. I think it's absolutely valid to bring that. But I also want to see more of like a modern take on what it means to be Filipino, or even like a future post-cyberpunk take, because I feel like it's important to acknowledge how we were colonized and how it changed us, mm-hmm. but how we can move forward. So that's why it was so important for me to make Balikbayan and to continue to work on it, to take it. Like, my dream is to have Balikbayan eventually on a bookshelf. Like, that's mm-hmm. the goal.
So I'm going to talk about my game, which is interesting, kind of counterpoint to what we've just been talking about. So mm-hmm. I ran for the first time Mutants in the Night, which is by DC. It's a Forge in the Dark game of mutants that these are people that are kept in these mutant safe zones. And this is based, of course, on Blades in the Dark. Forge in the Dark has all of the very classic, uses all the baseline for that. The key starting point is the idea that mutants have arisen. There's been an incident. A good chunk of the population, a significant amount, have become mutated. Some of them are visible, not visible. But the important thing is that the governments have decided that if you're a mutant, you're not human. And therefore you don't have human rights. And therefore you have to be put in these mutant safe zones. And that really changes things up, obviously. The PCs themselves are empowered mutants. They actually have powers that can do things, that can cause real effect, that can make change. And those EMPs are hunted down. So that's the basic premise, and it sets up the classic Forge in the Dark. You've got a job you need to do. You figure out what it's going to be. You plan how you're going to do it just a little bit. You carry out the job, figure out the fallout. We do the downtime. All of that's connected to some neighborhoods, factions, like here are where the sort of the street urchins live. Here's where the local clinic is, and so on. That there are the factions. And it's a really striking game. And I've run a lot of Forge in the Dark. I love the mechanical bits that it has, the powers, how it handles those. It has these flare points that are kind of this nice resource without being too much. I like how it sets up the idea of the characters being tied to community. in that when you take a job, it's for one of these, I think, 5 communities. And as you do more jobs for them, they give you benefits. So if you do more work for the clinic, it means that they're going to look out for you and it's going to be easier to get healing later on. So there's some mechanical things there, which I really appreciate. Here is the thing. I went into this knowing what the premise was and knowing what it was going to be about and being pretty up and ready to try this out. But one of the issues that I had, the game doesn't have as much in the terms of, here are the kinds of missions that you can do. Here are some example missions. Here are some ideas of what missions are going to look like. So a lot of that is in the GM's hands. How do I put this best? I discovered just how white I am, like super white, in the course of this. And I know that because I've run Pasiones, one of my favorite games of all time to run.
That's such a good game, also. Yeah.
Oh, I love that game. But one of the things here was that these are stories of marginalized groups that are in difficult situations pressed upon by an outside authority. And I was like, I want to be very careful that I'm not pushing the stories such that members of the marginalized groups are fighting each other.
Right.
Or imposing violence on one another, and that the threats come from outside. And I had that in my head. I went in 100% that, and I still managed to fuck that up.
Oh, no.
I still managed to, we would get into a situation and I would go back to my classic tropes.
Right.
I would fall back to those, and then suddenly our PCs are the authority figures in this situation. Or what's ended up happening is the violence is not directed, or solutions violence not directed outwards, but end up being internal. And it was shocking to me how, even though I had kind of prepped and thought about that, how hard that was. Not the hard of getting like I could get the feeling of the setting and so on, but there were some basic things about cultural codes and power and the relations between power and the marginalized and power and the oppressed, and I did peace studies in college. I thought Paulo Freire, I had a sense of this. I didn't. And I want to, I also want to point out Leandro Pondoc, who is, I can't remember if he's Filipino or not, but he's Southeast Asian originally. He lives in Ireland. And he was very good about saying to me, here's the issue I had with the game setup. With these things. And I really appreciate when we got to the roses and thorns, the stars and wishes, he was very upfront about that. And I want to go back and run it again. And I want to spend some time thinking about what are the kinds of stories we can tell that allow the group to have some hope, that allow the group to fight back and actually have a way to fight back against this oppressive force. It's a little bit, reminds me like Cryptomancer, which at heart, you can't win. Like you're revolutionaries, but in his original version of that, you're going to lose. And I really want to think about this. And I just say this is important. I think it's a great game. I think it's a dynamite game. I think people should run it. But if you are like me, that you may not be as aware of those things, I think that you need to do a little bit extra prep before you go to run it. Like there are some structural things about what kinds of stories are the stories that this game needs to be telling.
So are you falling back on comic book tropes or like basic drama tropes?
I think basic adventure tropes, like, okay, this is what we typically do in a role-playing game kind of thing.
Right.
I think that's where I got to. Like there was one moment that they went to negotiate with somebody. There had been a couple of bad rolls earlier, and I was like, oh, this is my chance to show that, in fact, here's the fallout from that. And what that ended up doing, that choice ended up putting them at odds with this person such that they couldn't talk. Then it was going to have to be about violence. And that felt like the wrong move when I thought about it afterwards. And I did fall back on, I was like, okay, well, I ran it too much like a standard Forged in the Dark or standard Blades in the Dark game. And some of that's that I think the rules are so, I know that DC worked on it and then stopped working on it.
Right.
But boy, it's so good. And that kind of GM material to help say, here's what you need to be doing, I think it would just be so good to see.
Yeah, because and when you talk about the tropes and you talk about what you lean on, I have to say, like, for me personally, I see that a lot also in the local scene. Like, a lot of Filipino GMs run white, which is it's really weird.
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's in the design itself originally, right? And so it's sort of like, for a long time, I played D&D for like many, many years, and it was only in the recent years that I thought, why are we always growing from killing things? Why do I go into a place I do not know, feel like I can kill the people there, take their stuff, and leave, right? But it's so ingrained, it's so normalized that you don't realize. And that's why there's all these conversations about decolonizing D&D, and some people feel it's pointless, some people feel like it's worthy to do. Like, I'm not going to tell anybody what to do with D&D, okay? Like, I just want to put that out there.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're having these conversations are good. And it's telling because DC worked on this really amazing game. DC is such an inspiration to me. They're such a beacon in the community. And it's interesting because Blades in the Dark feels very white originally, right? Like, it's a great system. Yeah. It's a beautiful system. But I loved it when DC took that and had started working on it. And I don't want to pressure DC, but I would like to see,
oh yeah,
more GM stuff. Yeah,
is that we're thinking about it is Blades in the Dark presents this sort of false sense that, oh, you're the oppressed, you're the criminals at the bottom of the rung, but it's not really that. Mm-hmm. You still have a lot of power, and you're about getting more power.
Yeah, and you're still very capable. Yeah,
yeah, you're using the tools of violence. You're using the tools of the oppressors on other people in most of the class choices there.
Right, for sure.
Now, you did mention the thing about that you're building up that community, which I think is awesome. And I know that there's some other hacks of Forge in the Dark that are using that, like, instead of the crew sheet, the Forge in the Dark thing, where they're working, like, you're building up the community, and in return you get from those tighter ties more. You don't get power, you get more capability or a different sense of how things work or more secrets.
Mm-hmm. I would definitely love to see more of that too. Yeah. I love community building as a goal and as something that you can mechanically do.
Yeah, and that's something a lot of marginalized folk, that's what we have to do, right? Because we don't have the same tools as everybody else. So what we have to do is help each other build up and work up, right? Because the system is built against us. We cannot succeed by going about it alone. It's impossible, right? The system will crush us back down. So I think when DC focused on the community, and it's something that comes up, for a lot of marginalized creators, the sense of community is something that comes up often in our design, because it's a reality that we know, that we have to work with others, we have to build each other back up again. Because, I feel like Spire, for example, but I'm going to be honest, because a lot of people say, oh, I can't run Spire because I'm not a Black person, but Spire was not made by Black people.
Right.
I don't want to get too much into it, but that always confuses me. I love Grant Howitt, and I love everybody else who created Spire, but I feel that's a weird talking point. But, that being said, they recently released Strata, which is a lot of ideas of how to run a campaign. And I think they did such a great job because they talked to so many different people. They got so many different creators from different backgrounds, and you can really feel it. So when you read through the scenarios, I don't know how else to describe it. You can really feel the oppression. You can really feel, you can feel how, and the Spire, the way that they build adventures is so good because they only give you NPCs, they give you what could happen, key events, but they tell you just pick what you want and see what happens. It's not like a typical adventure where you're supposed to follow a flow, which I feel never happens. When do the players do what you think they're going to do, right? So Spire instead is much more flexible. But I do think that the Strata supplement really strengthened Spire and made people more comfortable with running the game and more confident. So I'd really like to see more of that for sure for Mutants of the Night.
Yeah, and I haven't picked up Spire, so now you kind of pushed me that I'm going to have to
It's so good.
do that.
It's really good.
I think a takeaway for me is that running this game made me a little more aware of how much the tools and fallback improvisational tools and plots and things that are in my head have a set of baggage to them that I wasn't as aware of, and I need to be really thinking about that in a new way. It was a great game to run. I don't think I did a great job running it, but I learned a lot, and it's pointed me in a new direction.
Yeah, in a great direction, yeah.
So, listeners, we're going to move on to our second segment. Hello, listeners. We have two important pieces of Codex news to share with you. The first is that the hardcover edition of Codex Volume 1 is now available for purchase through Indie Press Revolution. This book is an exquisitely crafted journey into the early days of Codex magazine. It features the first 13 issues of Codex, including the original test issue, Codex Blood, as well as the Discern Realities Dungeon World Annual. The book features 300 full-color pages, 150 GSM paper, a spot UV cover, and a ribbon bookmark. It's a fantastic collector's item and would make a wonderful holiday gift. The next thing we want to tell you is that November is Catch Up on Codex Month. We're very proud of the Codex magazine. We want as many people as possible to check out all the amazing game material and artwork found inside its pages. With that in mind, anyone who pledges $6 or more to the Gauntlet Patreon in November will get the first 4 PDF issues of Codex Volume 4 as part of their pledge. That's Codex Melancholy, Gold, Childhood, and the newest issue, Void. These are easily 4 of the best issues we have ever produced, and you can get them all for a single pledge in November. And you'll get a new issue of Codex every month so long as your pledge stays active. So please check out the beautiful hardcover Codex Volume 1 book and the Catch Up on Codex Patreon special. We'll have links in the show notes. Tell us about what you're working on, what projects you have, whatever you want to talk about, because you've got a ton of great stuff. You just had that wonderful Halloween sale.
Oh, yeah, that was super fun.
Very excited about that. So what do you want to tell us about?
Wow, what am I working on? It's a lot. It's because a lot of people worry about me and how many games I come out. Well, a lot of my friends are like, Jamie, are you sleeping? Are you okay? But I am okay. I promise. I'm still getting like 6 to 8 hours every day of sleep.
Good.
But I do try to come up with about 3 games a month for my patrons, and I really love game jams. The Itch.io game jam scene is so much fun because I don't want to tell everybody they have to come up with about 30 games in a year. I don't think that's necessary. But I do feel like by joining all of these game jams, it really helped me. Each time I make a game, it gets easier and easier each time. Become One, the first one, was so difficult, even though it took 4 days because I kept doubting myself so much. I kept worrying about it so much. I mean, that worry that's not going to go away entirely, right?
Right.
But at least it's not as overpowering. I really enjoy that sense of just creating and playing these games with other people. But what I'm most excited about is I think I'm finally going to buckle down and work on some bigger projects. I think Balikbayan is one of those. But aside from that, I think what I'm going to tackle, and this is pretty big, is I want to make a masks hack. Like it's built on the mask system, but I want to also borrow from the system of Liberté, which is because Liberté is interesting in that you collect tokens every time your character feels a certain way. So you can, and it's up to you how much they take, like how strong that emotion is. Do they just take 1 token, or do they take up to 3 tokens? And then they can roll with that. But if they roll too high, if they hit an 11 plus, things sort of go wrong. So you're trying to hit the sweet spot between like 8 to 10, so it feels more gambly. It's really interesting. But then if you have too many tokens, so in Liberté, if you have more than 5 tokens, it's possible for you to explode because it's represented of your emotions, your bile, and it builds up inside you, and then it can explode, right? And I love that system. It's such a great take on it. And so I'm trying to combine that with masks, but also make it like it's a Harry Potter-esque, it's a magic school game. And I came up with the idea because I have this ongoing open table masks campaign here locally. It's drop in and drop out. Making masks drop in, drop out is like really hard, by the way. But anyway, it's a drop in, drop out system. And so one time I ran a game. I had 4 players, and they all played magical characters. It was the first time I've had 4 superheroes that were like magic based. I realized that most players don't pick those choices,
right?
Because like I was playing with a doomed. I'm trying to remember a doomed, a reformed, a Nova, and a Legacy. But they all chose the magical options. It was really interesting. And so when I ran the game, I was using the Phoenix Academy, part of Masks. And so to respond to that magic is like, as a GM, I'm going to be honest, like I don't plan a lot. I just sort of intuitively, because I want to base it off what choices the players made. So because they chose all this magic stuff, I was like, oh, now I have to put in all this magic stuff. What's the point if I don't lean into that? And so we ended up feeling, it felt like a Harry Potter game. Like we were in school, we kept hitting all these magical things. They came across a Harley that's secretly a unicorn and stuff like that. It was so much fun. And then they went into this tower that had extra rooms. It really felt like Harry Potter. And I was leaning into those archetypes and those ideas without thinking. And it came so naturally. And it was so much fun. And I was like, oh no, this is really fun. I have to make this game now. Like, I have to. But it's a lot of work, right? Because making a masks hack and all those playbooks. And it's also more work because I don't want it to be purely Harry Potter. Because as much as I loved Harry Potter when I was younger, there's like a lot of it that's...
Oh, there's some icky stuff in there.
Right? It's kind of problematic now. Like, when I go back and watch the movies, I'm like, Like one example is, I love Hermione. I relate to her a lot. I was Hermione growing up in school. But the way that she would like go, no, it's Leviosa. Like you have to pronounce it like this. And that's a very imperialist white kind of saying you can only perform magic if you pronounce it this specific way. And it has to be this dead language that nobody else uses, just the elite. You know, like it's all wrapped up in there. So, and then just the idea of the houses being so antagonistic with one another. Like, it's all like the stuff that I'm not 100% comfortable with. So how can I make it Harry Potter? But how can I make it more flexible? How can I make it more diverse? But how can I allow more player choice? And how can I have it reflect that as well? So that's currently that's the biggest thing I'm working on. And then the second biggest thing is I'm also a tarot reader. I'm a professional. That's a funny thing. I'm a professional psychic and tarot reader by day, and I'm a game designer by night. I say by night, but most of my time is in game design. Like, let's be honest. I try to create games where you can use the tarot and you can use it intuitively, because nothing breaks my heart more than seeing a game that they say has tarot mechanics, but it's just like using the tarot like a D20. Like that kills me, right? Because you might as well just use the D20 or just use a poker deck. Don't use the tarot deck. So I try to make games where you can intuitively interpret the cards also. Like I said that I don't prepare for a game, but what I do is I do a tarot reading before I have a game. So I pull cards like, what should the villain be like? I ask questions like, what does the villain think they want? But what do they actually want? Like, what will the players see, but what's hidden in the shadows? And I just pull cards for it. And I wanted to share those spreads with people. I wanted to share how to use the tarot to be more creative, to be more intuitive, both as a GM and as a player, or anything in between. And so I just talked about it briefly on Twitter, and people seemed really excited. So I thought, oh no, now I really have to work on this. So those are the two biggest things that I'm working on that I'm really excited about: the Harry Potter without the problems game, and the tarot, how to use the tarot to have more fun as a GM or player supplement. So that's what I'm working on right now.
And you've got a few itch.io games that use are like tarot explorations and so on right now, don't you?
Yeah. My favorite one, well, it's hard to say I have a favorite, right? I feel like that's unfair to my children. But actually, I want to recommend the one that inspired me first to do it was Grant Howitt's Royal Blood, which is also an itch.io game. And it's so good. It's really good because you use the major arcana. So Royal Blood it's a heist game, but it's also an urban fantasy. It's also like in a Neo Gaiman-esque kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
So you play the royals, as in they're based on the royal cards, like the Queen of Pentacles or the Knight of Wands. And Grant created these really cool characters. My only problem is there are no character sheets and stuff. I made those because,
of course,
because I was like, what am I supposed to do? But anyway, and so you choose which royal you are, and you're trying to go after one of the major arcana. You're trying to steal their power for your own and become an arcana and change the tarot forever. Like, it's really fascinating. And so you pull the major arcana to figure out who you're going after, what they have, what's protecting them, how are you going to get through. So you build the blocks, you build the heist with the major arcana. And then when you actually go after it, you have to wager something, one of your powers. So you have two sets of powers, like what makes you magical and what makes you mundane. Each time you have to wager it. So it's from memory, but like, for example, one of the characters has the ability to make anyone fall in love with them or something, or to be enigmatic, and they're like, I'm wagering this on the line, I'm going to use it. And then you have to pull a card from the minor arcana, and it's really you can see people's faces when they have to pull a card. I think it's ingrained in us, right? When we have to pull a card from the deck, we're like, oh no. And you feel this high, because if you pull a high enough card, like quartz and up, you get to do what you want and do it well. So it's kind of PBTA that way. But if you pull a lesser card, you crack or you damage what you wagered. If you pull a really bad card, you just lose what you wagered entirely. Like, it's absolutely gone. And in the game, you have a limited amount of stuff, what you can wager with. And it's such a beautiful system. So I built on that for a game I have called Summoner's Fate, where as a summoner, you have to wage your summoner ability, or you have to wage your familiar, your daemon that's assisting you. And every time, and then the thing is, if you break through all of it, what Grant Howard did originally is that you have to reveal a secret, but this is a jammy game, so I made it worse. So
I believe it.
right. So in Summoner's Fate, you have to reveal a dark secret, and you have to say what's really been connecting you to the adversary this whole time. And when I played the game, I'm going to be honest, I'm not very good at math, so I thought, we'll be able to make it to the end without anyone dying, probably. But every time I run Summoner's Fate, I've had most of the table end up with their dark secrets revealed. And it turns into this really intense game. And it's really high stakes, because it really makes the player decide, am I going to wager this? But the story won't move forward unless you wager something. So it really pushes you in interesting ways. So that's one of the tarot games I have. But I also enjoy having a more intuitive, like where you tell a story. So I have some games where the story structure is rigid in a way, like it's a lot of guidance, but every time you pull a card, it's up to you how to interpret it. So one of my favorites is called, it's such a dramatic title, it's called Their Love Destroyed This Land. And it's also my first love letter to colonialism, I'm going to be honest. Because what you do is you pull the major arcana to build this land that's beautiful, and you build their people. And the questions that the game asks you is, what makes this land more beautiful than anything before or after it? Or how do the people connect to the gods? And so you build this land together, people get attached. And then you have to create these three characters, the mage, the king, and the beast, who are outsiders, who come to the land, and they have good intentions at first, but they eventually destroy it with their love for each other. Like, the land becomes... Oof. Yeah. And so when I run the game, everybody always has this face of like, especially when I run it for Filipinos, they're like, yes, this is what they did to us. Like, there's this dawning of, this is what colonizing feels like. Because the game goes over the ages, and you have to like draw it on a map as time passes. But then when you reach the last age, you have to draw cards about how everything falls apart, how everything is destroyed, how they turn on each other, how the mage and the king and the beast abandon things, because that's what happens. The colonizers always abandon us, right? Like, after we're no longer useful, they leave. So I built that into the game. And then so they have to start erasing stuff on the map, or they have to start crossing stuff out or destroying it, you know? So when you're left with like this map that was once so beautiful and now looks which is, like my country. That's what happened after they left. So the tarot there is, even though the game is the same, no matter what happens, this destruction is going to happen, this tragedy is going to happen. But the cards you pull will change the story dramatically. Like, it's different every single time we play the game. And that's what I like about tarot stories, is you can play the same game again, but it feels so different each time. And that's why I really enjoy. But I'm still experimenting with like tarot mechanics. I'm still learning a lot, so I'm looking forward to what's next for sure.
Awesome. That all sounds amazing. And you have a Patreon, right?
Yes, I do. Sword Queen Games on Patreon. So you can help me. You can get 3 games every month. I make most of my games for my patrons, really. That's what I tell myself.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to our final segment here. So, listeners, in our final segment, we have each of us talk about what is giving us life. So, Sherry, what is giving you life?
This year, we hit Gauntlet Con, and I had a fabulous time. And I kind of looked back to last Gauntlet Con, and what's gone on between then and now has been so amazing to me. Just all this creativity and excitement about playing and making games with the people that I love and have gotten to know while I'm on the Gauntlet. And so, like, my niece came and she played in Gauntlet Con, and she was so excited, and she had such a good time, and she's like, I'm signing up, I'm coming to the Gauntlet.
Aww,
and it was just so wonderful to see her, because, you spend your life as a gamer nerd, and you don't I never expect anyone to come along. I'm like, please play, you might like it, but I never expect anything. And then when someone really is like completely smitten with a good game, you're like, yes.
Yeah, it's so satisfying.
Yes. But the other thing is like all these friends that I've made on the Gauntlet, they're out here, and of course they're playing good games and everything, but they're also hacking games, and they're writing their own games and putting them out there. And it's such a sort of crazy, wondrous, intoxicating excitement to see these things that they're doing, because they love this idea. They want to play this game, and they put it out there for you, and you all play it, and it's good, and it gets better while you're playing it and playtesting it, and and then they push it out, and it's just been, friends Rich, Patrick, Tyler, they've all written things, put them out there. There's a bunch of Gauntleteers that are doing the same thing. Kurt, and of course Story Brewers, and Catherine Rahman, but it's just like, and Louise. There's just so many good games out there, and new games out there, and people hacking a game that they love to play a genre that they want to play, or a very specific sort of TV show that they love to play. It is such good excitement. It seems like it's doubled since last year, and I'm hoping that it just keeps on doubling, and a boulder keeps on rolling through, because it has been yes, it has been that way. And it's kind of overwhelming to look back at the last year and go, whoa, lots of new stuff, lots of creativity, lots of excitement. It's been a boon year for gaming for me.
I don't think we can underestimate the importance of itch on what it has done.
It really changed things. Yeah. Because I started designing 2 years ago, but it was hard. There wasn't a community, there wasn't a way to get it out there. So when Ben Chong of Swords and Flowers started using itch.io, I was like, ooh, what is this? And it's just so easy to use. It's such an easy platform to use. DC's pointed out that the thing that's missing is, because itch.io is really focused on video games. So there's no print on demand aspect or something like that. That's the next step. But I will still say that the game jams and itch.io have really helped foster that creativity. It just sort of ignited it in this crazy way. It's so much fun.
Jamila, what is giving you life?
I haven't been designing as much because I have been playing The Outer Worlds a lot. It's so good, though. I'm having a really good time playing it. My partner, he's so happy to see me play because he loves the old Obsidian games. He loves the original Fallout and stuff like that. So he loves seeing me enjoy The Outer Worlds because it's very much like those older games, but it's still so much a new game. I'm having so much fun with it. It's very cathartic playing in this world where the evil is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's late capitalism and how everything is falling apart because of it, and it has this really dark humor, but it's funny, but it also makes you go like, like at the same time, which I think is really good. And I think one of my favorites is that one of the characters, one of the companions, is asexual, which is, we don't see
really
a lot
unusual.
of that. Yeah, we don't. And so as someone who's also ace, I really enjoyed that moment when I could tell the character, I could tell them, yeah, I'm also ace. And there was this moment where they said, oh, Captain, you are also, wow. And there was this, I know it's just a video game, but there was this moment of solidarity. I felt so good, and it gave me the power to go kill more things right after.
It was important power.
Yeah. Though to be fair, I like to build a character where I can talk my way through it, so, but I still have to kill things. You can't get away with it. It's still a video game, right? Like, let's be honest. Most of these you still have to kill things. But that's what's been giving me life.
So for me is something I just started. There's a company called Choice of Games. They won the Nebula for game writing last year, and they had several nominations. And essentially these are novels that are interactive fiction. Ooh. Big, long, choose-your-own-adventure novels. And I'm reading one called The Fog Knows Your Name. It's by Cleo Yunsu Davis. And it's like at its base, it's like 300,000 words.
Wow.
Now, some of those are repeated because of the branches and things like that, but it's really interesting to see because it doesn't feel like a choose your own adventure, because the choices are very much about how you're feeling about things and how you're reacting to things and that kind of internal drives. And it's written in that second person, and it's really good. And I know Choice of Games has a lot of titles out there. And this one is just really exciting. So that I've just started on it. I'm a couple chapters in, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. And I'm already like, okay, I definitely want to read this again with a different character in mind. So that's been very cool for me.
Yeah, I've played a few of their games. They're really good. They're super fun.
Oh, okay.
But I'll definitely look this one up. This one sounds fun.
Yeah. The only thing I don't like about them is that they're bad about crediting the authors on like the Steam page and things like that.
Yeah.
That bugs me. That's just a little thing.
Yeah.
It's hard to find out who wrote particular volumes, so they need to get better about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Listeners, that is our show, which has been, for me this week, super fun. Sherry, thank you for coming on and joining us for this.
I always like talking to you.
Yeah, fair enough. That's good. Let's keep that up. And Jamila, thank you so much. Where can people find you? If they want to find you online, where should they be tracking you down at?
So you can find me on Twitter. I post a lot of Sailor Moon GIFs and stuff. So I'm at Temporal Hiccup. And you can also find me on itch.io, temporalhiccup.itch.io. And there's also my Patreon, Sword Queen Games. That's where you can find me. If you do reach out, I'd be super excited. I love talking to people online. It's just so great to connect to the community. So I'd love to talk to you.
Listeners, this is part of the Gauntlet. If you're curious about the Gauntlet, you can find out more about that at gauntlet-rpg.com. We have our Patreon there, which includes our supporting our podcast, and it includes our monthly zine codex, which we've just have a new episode or new volume out for that. If you need to get a hold of us, you can get a hold of us at Gauntlet RPG on Twitter. We'd ask that you consider rating, subscribing, commenting. Any of those things would be super good because it does help us out. And listeners, once again, that's our show.